Welcome to the most overrated, underappreciated, most viewed, underviewed podcast of all time. Welcome to the Prince of Fresh Air. I'm, of course, your host, the beloved, the most charismatic man in entertainment. Beat that, Dwayne The Rock Johnson. I'm doing something different this week. I'm going solo. This is a one-man show, one-act comedy show, one stop. The Prince of Fresh Air, Percy Brown, the actor, the content creator, the host of the platform. Now, why am I going solo this week? What is the purpose? Why do y'all want to hear me ramble? Well, I got to say, this goes into the direction of the podcast. So when I started this podcast 4 years ago, my mission was to be inclusive of all guests and talk about the hard-hitting subjects. And over the last few years, I've noticed that, as we left the pandemic, those type of topics, as great as they weren't universally loved, and they weren't the best type of episodes. I started seeing what people liked. What do you, as my listeners and supporters around the world, liked? And so, Dwayne The Rock Johnson called me out. Kevin Hart, Jason Momoa, Hugh Jackman, Ryan Reynolds. They wanted me to be in the Deadpool Wolverine movie, but I said, nah, I want to steal all the spotlight because they already know what time it is when I show up. But anyway, I digress. I want to give too many spoilers. So the reason why I'm going solo is because as I've made a bigger transition this year with the podcast, getting different guests on, especially ones with huge platforms in their own prospective careers and their line of work, getting those type of guests on takes a lot of time. It takes a lot of planning, takes a lot of research and, setting the time right, getting the date right, locking in, plugging in the mic and all the good stuff. And it's been a great year, 2024, and that aspect has been that launch. I've been able to have some amazing guests, entertainment and sports. And so I want to continue on that trajectory. As they say, at some point you got to level up. And that's when I'm leveling up this year. So, with that being said, it's going to be different now that I'm getting more high-profile guests on. It's going to be a lot more time invested to get those type of things, those guests on. So it might, as episodes, I try to have it, on a certain schedule. And because I'm trying to get more high-profile guests on, it might take some time to get them on. So there's going to be a couple episodes here and there that's going to be filler, if you will. If you want to hear the most charismatic man, of course, it's not filler. It's just quality entertainment for the family and for you, So as going forward, that's the plan. So I have some big things lined up. I have some pretty interesting guests that is going to come on. So stay tuned for that. It's going to be interesting next few months and going into 2025, a big change to the podcast. Now, I know you're wondering, what is he going to talk about this whole episode? Is he going to just talk about his luscious hair, his crisp eyebrows, his amazing charismatic personality? Well, I could do that, but I'm not going to do that. I actually want to talk about the Jon Jones, Tom Aspinall, Stipe Miocic situation. Now, before I get to it, I do want to address something because people have asked me, am I turning this into an MMA podcast? Well, you're going to be disappointed when I say, no, I'm not. I am a huge UFC fan. I watch it every week. As some of you may know, Jon Jones is my favorite fighter of all time. And so when I have on Kevin Iole, one of the most respected journalists, James Lynch, another well-respected journalist in the MMA UFC community, it made me think about broadening my horizon when it comes to talking about certain topics. So with that being said, this is the one-man show. Buckle up, get ready, because we're going to talk about Jon Jones, Tom Aspinall, Stipe. So the reason why I want to talk about it, for people who saw the Kevin Iole special episode that I did with him, we talked about the whole Jon Jones debate, right? And as someone who's paying attention to the UFC weekly, daily, I'm privy to the conversations that's happening. And Dana White, president of the UFC, has been under fire from fans and from some media about his glazing of Jon Jones, if you will. And so I want to talk about, why is this happening? What is going on? So I want to backtrack to what Kevin Iole and me talked about. Jon Jones is the consensus greatest of all time, if you ask most people, especially MMA media. Jon Jones, call me, you know what I'm saying? The podcast waiting, man. But anyway, I digress. That's not what this is about. Jon Jones is the greatest fight of all time, greatest light heavyweight without a debate. And so the conversation of pound for pound has came up. And part of the reason I wanted Kevin to come on was because there was a viral debate with him, and recently another one with him and Dana White about Jon Jones. Why is he so animate on, up and praising Jon Jones? And it goes back to business. Just like in my career, just like in my profession, acting, it's entertainment industry. It is a business. So is the MMA space. And so for Dana, he's a businessman. Jon Jones is one of his top draws in the UFC. He's the greatest fighter of all time. When you're a promotional boss like that, you want to make sure you sell your fighters and you sell the fight. Stipe and Jon is the fight to make, and it's the fight that's going to happen, whether people like it or not. It's going to happen. And so for Dana, people need to realize he's a businessman. He's smart. You start putting that out there, it gets the media talking, it gets the fans talking, it gets celebrities talking, get other fighters talking. And what happens with that is ups the fight, because now everybody wants to see that fight and people want to tune in to see it. So the whole bit with pound for pound, and me and Kevin kind of got into it, but it really comes down to your definition of pound for pound. Now, for me, I disagree with Kevin because I feel like, he said Jon Jones is the greatest of all time. He's the GOAT, but he's not the current pound for pound men's fighter right now. I say, and I kind of agree with Dana. I know people won't call me a glazer. It's part of the job. I get it. When you look this good and you speak this sharp, it's bound to happen at some point, right? But Jon Jones, when I think of pound for pound means regardless of weight, who do you think is the best fighter right now? And people point to his inactivity over the last few years and him taking time off. And one of the biggest talking points was, should Jon Jones be the pound for pound number one, despite the fact that he is an active fighter and he had a fight booked with Stipe Miocic of November 2023 for that heavyweight championship before it got postponed due to injury. I say he should, because the injury shouldn't disqualify you. And yes, Jon Jones hasn't been the most active fighter recently, but when you have a body of work spanning 14 years, youngest UFC champion of all time, most title defenses, most title wins, longest winning streak, unbeaten streak, that speaks for something. That counts for something in this space. And so Jon has the legacy. He has the resume. And if you put him against Islam Makhachev, the UFC lightweight champion, if you put him against Alex Pereira, the UFC light heavyweight champion, as beloved as they are, I think Jon Jones gets that edge. And so for me, he has to be pound for pound number one. And so, everybody's going to disagree on that. But anyway, that's not the main talking point. The main talking point is, why is Jon Jones and Tom Aspinall not fighting? Well, I got the answer for you. Jon Jones, Stipe Miocic, was already booked before Tom Aspinall got the call. Now, so this is part of the reason why I say fans are suffering recency bias. Ever since the pandemic, a lot of fans, we got a lot of new fans, a lot of Twitter personalities and accounts that talk about what's happening right now. What have you done for me right now? And I think a lot of the times, and I agree with James Lynch on this, people didn't watch Jon Jones when he was, active. They didn't watch his career. They didn't watch him when he was the light heavyweight champion of the world. And same with Stipe. A lot of fans just look at that last loss he had against Francis, who, by the way, he beat to defend his title the first fight and won. People look at Stipe and call him old, washed up. Get him out of here. He's a full-time firefighter. Get him out of here. And it's just a lack of respect for two greats. And if you ever watched Jon Jones compete, especially when he was younger, I mean, Rashad Evans, Rampage Jackson, Chael Sonnen, the master trash talker himself, Alex Gustafsson, 2 fights, Daniel Cormier, 2 fights, Ovin St. Preux, the list goes on, Alito Machida, there's so many, Vitor Belfort. He went through murderer's row to get to where he is today. And he's defending his belt time and time again. And I already know what's going to happen. People are going to talk about Oh, well, him and Dominic Reyes was a close fight. Dominic Reyes clearly won. They just didn't want to give it to him. Jon couldn't beat a one-legged fighter in Thiago Santos, who hurt his knee in their fight. I always count it and I always tell people, every fighter is going to have close fights at some point. Every fighter. Mike Tyson, Muhammad Ali, Floyd Mayweather, Deontay Wilder, Tyson Fury, Francis Ngannou, Jon Jones, Israel Adesanya, Alexander Volkanovski, the list goes on. Every fighter is going to have close fights. And that is a great thing because it not only pushes the fighter, but it gives us those classic fights. Daniel Cormier versus Jon Jones, two fights that belong and will be in the UFC Hall of Fame. When you're a fighter like that, you're going to get pushed at some point, especially when you're fighting the best fighters in the world. Not everybody's going to be like a Khabib Nurmagomedov. And even then, people criticize him, George St. Pierre, for leaving the sport too early or coming for a quick paycheck and leaving. And every fighter is going to view fighting differently. Some is going to be like a Kevin Holland. They want to take any and every fight, get paid, and be one of those entertaining gunsluggers. But you also have on the flip side the people like Jon Jones, Conor McGregor, and many others, Israel Adesanya, who's going to take fights that mean a lot for their legacy and they get paid for. The money fights, the big fights. Every fighter is going to have a risk management approach to their career in one way or another. Not everybody's going to be a Justin Gaethje, stand in the middle of the ring, giving you barn burners after barn burners, win the performance of the night every time. Jon Jones is a guy who values his legacy. Conor McGregor values his legacy. Israel Adesanya, Alexander Volkanovski, Mike Tyson, all those greats value their legacy. And they're not going to just be taking fights just to take fights, unless you're Floyd Mayweather and it's, you're making a lot of money and you're past your prime. Anyway, no disrespect to Floyd Mayweather. But to go back on point, for Jon, he took the time to move up. And unfortunately, the Francis Ngannou fight didn't happen. Contrary to what people might think, I don't think either fighter ducked each other. I do think money and contracts played a big part in why the fight didn't happen. But it is what it is. Life happens. Khabib Nurmagomedov and Tony Ferguson, prime example of a fight that should have happened many years and many times, but never did. But Jon Jones goes out and defeats Ciryl Gane in March of 2023 to win the UFC Heavyweight Championship. That was one of the most remarkable pay-per-views I've seen because it was the intrigue to see how does Jon look now being an older fighter and moving up to a heavier weight class. How does he do in that division? And he passed that test. And he did it flawlessly. And I love Ciryl Gane. I will never knock Ciryl Gane. He is one of my favorite fighters right now and someone to look out for as he continues his journey. But Jon Jones is 37 now. And so for him, his legacy is established. He doesn't need to fight anymore. He could retire right now and still be the GOAT. He could go out and defeat Stipe Miocic and just make it more solidified. Stipe, the greatest heavyweight of all time in many people's eyes. And his body of work, most title defenses. The dude has been one of the most stable fighters in the heavyweight division over the last 10 years. Plus, he deserves this money fight. And he deserves this fight not only for the legacy of his career, but the money. And, he is a full-time firefighter and he hasn't fought in 3 years. But when you earn the right to call your own shots, you get to call your own shots. That's just the bottom line. And I think a lot of people don't take the time to understand why they're getting this fight. Tom Aspinall got this call because Jon Jones tore his pec muscle right before their fight. So he got the call and he beat Sergey Pavlovich, who, by the way, I always say people conveniently always, forget about. I remember around that time, people thought Jon Jones was scared of Sergey Pavlovich. And what happened? Well, Tom Aspinall knocks him out in less than a minute, and people call him fraud checked. That's a new term now, fraud checked. So apparently Sergey Pavlovich was fraud checked. Ciryl Gane was fraud checked. They were never that good. So Tom Aspinall is the interim heavyweight champion. And a lot of people want to see Jon Jones take on Tom Aspinall. And I always tell people, I understand it, I'm not opposed to seeing it. But Jon Jones and Stipe was already a signed agreement. These two legendary fighters with iconic careers deserve to have this fight, whether the fans want it or not. They earned the right, just like Tony Ferguson. As much as I love Tony Ferguson, just like everybody else, dude was on a 5, 6, 7, 8 fight lose streak and was still getting fights. Why? Because of his service for the UFC. He took on short notice fights. He went out there, went on a 12 fight winning streak. And unfortunately, he took a lot of setbacks after since the pandemic. But his service, his record, his belovedness from the fans allowed the UFC to continue giving fights, despite the fact that he now broke BJ Penn's record for most losses back to back. So this fight is going to happen. Now, does Tom Aspinall deserve to fight Jon Jones? It's debatable. Does Jon Jones need to fight Tom Aspinall? No. Now, how can the most charismatic man be so up and down in that? Well, like I said, you have to look at their careers. Tom Aspinall is young, interim champion. He's going to be the face of the heavyweight division for many years to come. He has a lot of years left on the mileage. Jon Jones is 37, got into the UFC at 21. Does he need to fight Tom Aspinall? No, because his legacy is already established. Stipe versus Jon is a legacy fight. It's about who is the true biggest and baddest. Tom Aspinall, as much as I love him, he's not a huge draw yet. He's not a Conor McGregor. He's not a Jon Jones pay-per-view draw yet. And he's not going to bring in the numbers like Stipe would. And I know people like to knock Stipe for his age and his inactivity, but the proof is in the pudding. This is MSG, Madison Square Garden. I can step outside right now and see it. Well, not that close. I can take the train and see it. But this fight is going to be a barn burner. It's going to sell out the arena. And that's what it's about. UFC is a business. Jon Jones versus Stipe Miocic is very big business. And it's going to happen. And Tom Aspinall needs to realize his time is coming. But his time is not right now. Like John Cena used to say. It's not yet. And he has to wait. Because Jon Jones don't need him to secure his legacy. And I see fans talk about this all the time on X, formerly Twitter. Jon Jones is ducking Tom Aspinall. If Jon doesn't fight Tom Aspinall, he's not the GOAT. He's ducking. His legacy will forever be tainted. I disagree with that. I wholeheartedly disagree with that. You know why? When GSP came back and he fought Michael Bisping and won the middleweight championship, people called him out on it, but people forgot about it months after. Once the new champion was crowned, they didn't talk about it. People don't talk about it right now. And GSP is still highly regarded as top 3 greatest of all time, if not top 2. Jon Jones doesn't need to fight Tom Aspinall. Stipe means a lot more for not only his wallet, but his legacy. And that's what happens when you get to that point. Floyd Mayweather, LeBron James, Steph Curry. Now, basketball is different. You think LeBron don't call his own shots? If he don't want to stay with the Lakers, he don't have to. If he wants to retire, he can. He has a say on his teammates are. When you become that type of influence in your sport, you can call whatever shot you want. There's a reason why Conor McGregor ain't fighting an up-and-comer in lightweight or welterweight. There's a reason why he called out and he took the fight against Michael Chandler, because he has earned the right to do whatever he wants. And the UFC is going to risk not making these two great legendary fighters unhappy, and potentially letting them sit out, maybe, get out their contract, ride out the contract, go somewhere else. Imagine losing a Conor McGregor or Jon Jones to a PFL or Bellator. Not good for business. So Tom Aspinall, as much as I like him, I think that a lot of fans have it twisted. He doesn't call the shots. A great fighter, one of my favorites right now too. I can't wait to see Tom Aspinall versus Ciryl Gane. But he can't tell Jon what to do. You think Tom Aspinall could tell Dana to tell Jon he needs to fight him in Madison Square Garden or else? No. I think Jon and Stipe has earned the right to fight, and they will fight. And I think Tom Aspinall deserves the winner. Now, that becomes murky. That's another twist into this plot, is because Madison Square Garden, Jon versus Stipe, is very intriguing in many aspects. One, can Jon Jones replicate that first success he had at heavyweight? How does he look against a Stipe Miocic, the greatest heavyweight of all time? Despite the age and despite a few years off, can he go out there and be the heavier and more well-respected individual in Stipe in that division? Can Stipe deal with the dynamic striking of Jon Jones, the wrestling, the striking, the fight IQ? Can he go out there and deal with that? Because we don't see a lot of heavyweights throwing spinning back fists, spinning elbows, spinning wheel kicks, oblique kicks, a lot of dynamic striking. Now, the biggest part about this is what happens after this fight. Does Stipe retire, win or lose? Does Jon Jones, Stipe win or lose? What happens if Stipe beats Jon Jones? Does Stipe stick around for one more fight and give Jon Jones another chance to crack at it? What if Jon Jones wins and he retires? What if Jon Jones decides he want to fight Tom Aspinall? There's a lot of interesting pieces, and this is why Dana is doing what he's doing. Jon Jones even got into the mix and started putting out promotional material, calling himself, Duck in Tom Aspinall, because they understand the trend right now. And this is just a recurring thing when you're the greatest. There's always going to be that new up-and-comer that people want you to face, regardless. When it was Ciryl Gane, he beat him. They call him a fraud check. He wasn't that great. When Tom Aspinall beat Sergey Pavlovich, people who said Sergey Pavlovich, they forgot about the narrative before, but they said Sergey Pavlovich is a fraud check and he's not good. This is going to keep happening. And so I think that it's going to be a very interesting few months. And we're going to see, it's going to be interesting to see what happens after Stipe and Jon lock in that cage and touch gloves and get to work. But for me, ultimately, as the Jon Jones Glazer, as people want to call me that, I'm expecting it. I think Jon Jones beats Stipe. Jon Jones might come back and fight Tom Aspinall, maybe if the money is right and it makes sense. But I think we might see the witness of the end of two eras, Stipe and Jon. I think they both ride off to the sunset if Jon wins. And if Jon doesn't win, then they will do a rematch. And then we might see a retirement after. It really just depends on Jon, not Stipe. I think Stipe is done after this, unless he wins. I think he's done. And I think Jon might come back because he's still younger than Stipe. He has a couple more fights if he wants to. The risk management has to make sense, and the money has to make sense. He's not going to fight a Tom Aspinall for less money. He's going to make sure his wallet is funded and his pockets are full before he takes on that fight. And people like to say, well, if you're about that life, you don't need to worry about payment. Well, yes, you do. You think Tyson Fury is fighting for less than $5 million? You think Floyd Mayweather is taking a pay cut? You think LeBron James is going to take a pay cut for anybody besides his son? No. So people need to realize it's prize fighting. When you get to that level, Conor McGregor, Jon Jones, Israel, Volk, all of these greats, they are looking at themselves from a financial standpoint and a legacy standpoint. It doesn't matter what fight you take. If you are not financially comfortable at the end of it, what was the point? You risk your legacy, you risk your record, you risk potential other money-making opportunities for what? When you still got to take another fight because you can't pay your bills. So it's going to be interesting a few months. Does Jon fight Aspinall? I don't know. It remains to be seen. Would I like to see it? I'm not opposed to it. I would much rather see Tom versus Ciryl Gane. I think that fight should happen. Alex Pereira. What about him? Alex Pereira is another one I could see Jon Jones sticking around for. It's going to be interesting. A lot of options the UFC haven't had in so many years. You have so many options. You could do Jon versus Aspinall. You could do Aspinall versus Ciryl, Jon versus Pereira, Pereira versus Tom, Stipe versus Tom, Stipe versus Pereira. It's a lot of options, and it's good to be a Jon Jones and a Stipe and the UFC right now because you have so many options, and the demand is high now. Jon, Stipe, Tom, now they have leverage to make money, make more money than they ever have. So it's great big business right now happening. It's very controversial topic for some reason, but I also ultimately think it's just because fans don't do their research and understand the business side of the UFC. Just like in my profession, a lot of people think about the acting part, but they don't think about the business part. So it's going to be interesting. If not, I'll see you. The most charismatic man is here. Dwayne Around Johnson. Let me say this before I go. Let me get my WWE persona ready. Dwayne, I'm with the old and with the new. You're old news. I'm new news. I am the new generation. I am the new blood. I am coming for you. Now, this is no disrespect, Dwayne, but you're being replaced by the most charismatic man. So I challenge you. Come on this platform. The most charismatic man versus the most electrifying man. Let's see who does the business better. Let's see. I challenge you. And if you don't want to take the challenge, I understand. But anyway, I'm just throwing it out there. You know what I'm saying? Just give me a call. Anyway, thank you guys for tuning in. This was an interesting concept. I never really thought about doing my own episode, but what the hell? Let's have some fun. The summer's over, unfortunately, but you know what? We're gonna keep rocking and rolling, keep the party rolling. And like I always say, a helping hand is a better hand. You don't have to go home, but you can't stay here.